You're listening to Make Money and Change the World, an Optimal Living interview with Marie Forleo and Brian Johnson.
I am so excited to be chatting with Marie Forleo today, and she is just awesome, and her B School is extraordinarily popular and powerful. And Marie, thank you for being here, first of all.
Oh, I'm honored to be with you, Brian. This is great.
Right on. Well, I've been such a big fan of you and your work, and Alexandra, my wife, as well, and excited to unpack some of my favorite big ideas. And I know that a big commitment that you have via your B School and all the other work you do is to help people make money and change the world, which are two phrases that go so beautifully together. And I wanted to start with asking you, what do you think gets in the way of most people getting paid to do what they love to do, make that money, and make a difference in the world? What do you think gets in the way?
One of the primary things that gets in the way is people not believing that they can do it, not believing that they're worth it, not believing that their idea is special enough, that their gift is special enough, or that they're deserving of wealth, especially material wealth. I think so many of us, and I will include myself here, have grown up with some pretty interesting ideas, some limiting beliefs around money, or, just some deep-seated thoughts about what it means to be wealthy. Is it good or is it bad? And, depending on what kind of religious context you grew up in, if you grew up in any, even if you didn't grow up in any, I know, just many people around the world have a lot of hang-ups about money. And I think that most of us grow up with that. And so when it comes to creating our own business or even getting paid what we're worth in a career that we love, if we're part of a company that we really appreciate, a lot of people can feel really held back. But I think it all begins within.
Yeah. So then how do you help people transition through that? Like, what's the orientation toward money that's going to best serve us?
Well, the first thing is to recognize it, right? It's kind of like when you have a drinking problem. If you have a drinking problem, it's like the first step is to go, okay, I'm out of denial. I have a problem. And the same thing about your thoughts about money. Rather than a drinking problem, it's usually a thinking problem. So I think the first best step is to say, yeah, and not be ashamed about it, not be embarrassed about it, not think that it is something that has to last forever, but to really get curious and investigate how you operate around money. Do you get tight? When you pay your bills every month, do you start to get nervous and sweat or feel a tremendous amount of anxiety? Or pay attention to the thoughts that you're thinking in your head, or what is really the language and the words that you're using as you talk to yourself, like, oh, there's never going to be enough, I can never get ahead, or no one would ever pay me for that. No one's ever going to, who am I? I'm not that special. Why would anyone want to buy anything from me? So if you just start to bring awareness to those thoughts, I think that's the first step in being able to change or transform them. And one of my core beliefs, and something that I share with everyone that I work with and everyone that I can reach, is that every single human being is on the planet for a reason. God or the universe, whatever you believe in, doesn't create any extra peeps. So each of us has our own unique set of gifts. And I believe our life purpose is to not only discover what those gifts are, but to use them in service of others. And when you really get that and you start living that way, a lot of the hang-ups that all of us have around money start to just naturally fall away, because you have less attention on, what am I getting for myself? And your attention and your energy is more focused on what you can give, what you can provide, and how you can make a difference. And that's that magical energy shift where money starts to come in and opportunities start to come in. And ironically, you almost start to focus less on money and more of it shows up.
So beautiful. One of my favorite writers, a guy named Steve Chandler, talks about wealth creation as a vehicle through profound service. So we create wealth through profound service. I just love the way you articulate that. And using our gifts, I like to say using our greatest gifts and greatest service to the world. And open and allow that wealth to be a reflection of that value and that service that we're creating in the world, right?
Yes.
Right on. Well, we could talk about that for a week.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, it was really interesting. I was watching your interview with Tony Robbins, and it was amazing to hear you describe your story and some of the parallels. And you mentioned kind of your deep intuition of you just knew when you were on the, trading floor that it just wasn't what you were there to do. And then you had that moment where you read about life coaching and you just, you knew there was just a deep intuition. And it was funny because I've had very, very similar moments where I literally pulled off the 405 and threw up on my way home from work. And I'm like, this is a good sign. It's not it. And, looking up and seeing my boss's boss's boss and saying, I don't want that job. And then feeling the fear of, but what do I want to do? And having that heroic courage to step into that force of the unknown. I'd love to, if you can share about how do we deal with that fear? How have you dealt with that fear of kind of leaving the comfortable and really carving out the known when when you're just getting going, and when someone's listening to this and saying, yeah, that's nice, but I got bills to pay and, all these different things going on. Like, how do you frame that?
Well, I think for all of us, the recognition that our time in physical form on planet Earth is limited. We are not going to be here forever unless there's major breakthroughs that could happen, over the next 15 to 20 years. All signs point to the fact that we all know we're headed to the same destination, which means that at some point we're going to die. And if you start looking at your life, and that could be a morbid thought, I think it's a really inspiring thought. I think it's a really enlightening and energetic thought, which is like, you know what? I need to get off my buns and do what I want to do in this world. I'm never going to be happy if I don't follow my intuition. And to your point, someone says, oh, yeah, it's all great and good, but what about the bills to pay? There's always a way to pay the bills. And throughout history and throughout, reading magazines and watching television shows, we've all heard stories of people that come from extraordinary circumstances of challenge and figure out a way to make it happen. Whether they downsize their house and they move to a new neighborhood, whether they take on extra jobs at night or at the weekend, or they make these changes in their world that may be uncomfortable, that may not be the thing that everyone else does, but that are absolutely necessary to get where you want to go. I believe when you hear that calling within, when you get that intuitive hit, and there's no other way for you to go but to step out into the unknown and to create the life that you want, you will find a way to make it happen. And I know that's it may sound like, oh, that's all well and good, but everyone that I've been privileged enough to meet, from the Richard Bransons to the Tony Robbins to the Oprahs, to people that, you and I wouldn't know their name, but they're extraordinary human beings who've created a life that they love, that's their story. Because we can go on and on for days, right? Every circumstance is different, and people can come up with 1,000,001 reasons why I can't do something. But people who change the world, they focus on what they can do. They focus on being willing. They focus on, I have something I want to get to. I have something that I want to create. I'm going to find a way.
Yeah.
And when you have that mindset, that's when opportunities start to open up. You get ideas. You start to see new possibilities for ways to change. And that's where I think it all begins.
Right on. So it's kind of that Joseph Campbell's phrase of follow your bliss. And when you do that, when you truly commit W.H. Murray style, magical things happen. Hidden doors you didn't know were there suddenly appear, and opportunities exist that we just didn't know. So love that. Again, there's another week-long conversation for us.
Yeah, and it's natural though, right? It's natural to feel that fear. And I mean, I still feel it at times. It's much, much less than it ever was before. But I think that's part of being human. And to think that that's not going to be around, or that other people don't have it and they just forge ahead, I think that's a little bit ignorant.
Yeah, right on. Well, this is one of the things I talk about too, is that we all have fear. The only ones who don't have fear or anyone who says they're never afraid of anything, a guy named David Reynolds says, is both stupid and lying. Right. So we all have fear. Now, this is great. So we recognize that we all have fear. And then what do you do when you feel that fear? What did you do maybe earlier on? What do you do now? What do you recommend one does when that fear gremlin kind of creeps in?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of the things that I've always done is I like to look at the worst case scenario, because I like to just face it and say, okay, if I quit my Wall Street job and I go and try and figure out what I'm supposed to do, and let's say I don't get a good job right away, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Okay, well, I would work a couple of restaurant jobs to pay my rent, and yeah, maybe I wouldn't feel, my ego wouldn't be served that much, but would I still eat? Yes. You know what I mean? Would I figure out a way? Yes, I would. So at every different turn, when fear comes up, I'm like, really, what is honestly the worst thing that's going to happen? And 9 times out of 10, usually actually 10 times out of 10, I can deal with it.
Yep.
I know that I can deal with it. And I think what most people do is they just kind of stop and they won't even look at what the worst case scenario is. So the fear is almost this ghost that has no shape. It's ominous. It overtakes them. But if you really break it down and look at the reality, most things that we fear are really easy to deal with, and they probably will never happen, those worst case scenarios. So that's one of my methods for dealing with it.
That's cool. Give us another one. This is great.
So the other one, as far as dealing with fear, is I'm really, just like, oh, God, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Rather than hold on to that myself, I talk about it. I'll talk about it with people that I trust, people who are like-minded, that share a similar philosophy in terms of creation, in terms of having a life that they really love. They want to be fully self-expressed. They want to leave with their song fully sung and being totally used up by the end of their life. And, when you talk with friends about fear and say, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I'm afraid of, if it's someone who's supportive and who loves you, they'll be able to, A, listen, and oftentimes when you just speak things out loud, I find that they transform. If someone really, really hears you, you can almost hear your own wisdom and you'll see new possibilities. Or they'll be able to give you a fresh perspective and say, hey, I can totally understand that. I know somebody went through it. This is what happened with them. Or here's what's going to happen if it goes wrong, and here's what could happen if it goes right. Mm-hmm. And they can reflect back to you and give you a little perspective and a little support that can be incredibly transformative.
That's so cool. You have a third tip? We're on a roll.
In terms of fear, for me, if I actually let myself experience the physical sensation of fear, and this we could talk about for a week, but without going into the drama in my thoughts about what it means. So for most of us, fear is actually, we have different sensations in our body, like the atoms are vibrating at a certain rate. Maybe for some of us, it's like a tightness in our chest, or for others, it's like a heaviness in our belly, or perhaps a constriction in our throat. And if you focus on the physical sensation, like what you're actually feeling physically, and do not engage with the story that's simultaneously happening in your brain, and you just stay focused on the present moment, the sensation, the feeling, the experience of fear actually dissipates pretty quickly. My fiance teaches a course called Committed Impulse, and one of the things he taught me, which I think is genius, but if you ever fully experience any physical sensation and really are present with it, without judging it, without resisting it, just really there with it, it never lasts more than 7 to 10 seconds.
God, that's awesome. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing those three fantastic ideas. And this is kind of tied to failure, right? So we talked about, the idea of what's the worst case scenario. Brilliant. Get that ghost, draw some lines around it, and see it for what it is, right? And then know we're going to be strong enough to deal with it. So let's talk about failure and the importance of reorienting our relationship to, quote, failure, and how it's such an important part of the success process. Can you riff on that?
Yeah. One thing, it was something that we tweeted out recently, and forgive me because I don't know who said this. It certainly wasn't me. I didn't make this up. But I love this. It was like, I win or I learn, but I never fail. I win or I learn, but I never fail. And I thought that was freaking awesome. Like, if you just break that down and think about it, it's like, okay, either you succeed or you learn something. Nothing's really a failure. And if I look back in my own career, and I look back in things that I poured money in, like an example, I remember one time, probably about 4 years ago, I had this idea. I was working on a particular coaching program, and I wanted it all housed on my website, on my own domains, and I wanted this whole member area. And it was kind of before a lot of the, plug-and-play things that we have today. And I sank about, $5 or $6 grand into this development project, which, A, is a lot of money in anyone's eyes, but especially a couple years ago for me, that was major. And the whole thing crashed and burned. And, I could look at that as a failure, but I can't tell you how many times that experience has served me through all of the different things I've learned, just about how to really choose programmers, how to trust my intuition, how to really plan things and allocate my assets and my intelligence and all of my resources to the projects that make the most sense at the right time. And ultimately, it didn't take the company down. It didn't take me down. Like, nothing bad happened, really. So I think if you can look back at the stories that you've told yourself in life about where you quote-unquote failed and really re-examine that with fresh eyes and with a fresh heart and look through the lens, what did I learn? How did I grow? What did that teach me? How did that serve me? How did that help me get to a better, bigger, more expanded, more loving place? You'll see that there really are no failures. There are only places to learn.
So genius. And this is where freedom exists, right? And I'm a huge fan of positive psychology and the science of all this stuff. And just, looking at it through what they would call the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So it's basically, I win or I learn, but I never fail. Yes. Just what a great, profound thought. And this ties to one of my just really enjoyed your New Year's video. And you had a great line in there where you said, you don't have to get it right, you just have to get it going.
Yeah.
And I just thought, it was one of those like, yeah, that's not only a tweetable moment, but just it's it right there, right? You don't have to get it right, you just have to get it going. So I'm a huge fan of getting to market, churning, letting the market tell us what works, what doesn't. John Mackey from Whole Foods says, ready, fire, aim. And so many of us get stuck in that aim process. But tell us about that. Tell us about that big idea.
Yeah, this is particularly big. I mean, I think it's an issue for many of us, especially many of us who consider ourselves creatives. We're creators. We're constantly wanting to put things out into the world. And also we want to do a great job. We want to be of ultimate service. We want to put out our best work. However, and I've seen this to be true because I happen to be lucky enough to be in touch with and in community with a lot of women. Women in particular have this one bad, perfectionism, wanting to be perfect. It's like a part of our instinct, and it could so screw us up. And, one of the things that MarieTV has really taught me, and I continue to do, and it's really fun for me, is I'm learning in public. It's like it's this amazing opportunity to screw up in public. We don't get things right. There's things that go wrong. There's times when we fully edited something and we're like, oh, my God. Like there's spelling errors. There's, just all kinds of stuff that goes wrong. But for me, I always have to ask myself, like, I'm giving it my best. And perfectionism is one of those places for me where I can just beat myself up, get myself exhausted, hold things back. So it's a real opportunity for me to shed some of that and not lower my standards at all. And this is actually something that Tony Robbins taught me. Perfectionist and being perfect is really the lowest standard there is because there is no standard. And perfection is really, it's not achievable. So if that's your standard, you don't have any. And I thought that was really freeing because it gives us room to create art and to be human. And one of the pieces of feedback that we get all the time is how people appreciate that things aren't perfectly polished. It's this kind of interesting paradox because while we put our best effort in, we're always taking things to the next level. I leave in flubs. I leave in things that my editors will say, do you want me to that? I'm like, no, that was a human moment. When we shoot things and sometimes they're like, hey, Marie, you flubbed that word. I'm like, I don't care. Leave it in. As long as the content, you know what I mean, the essence of it, what we're trying to share wasn't confusing, the point is coming across, let's leave it because it gives all of us a chance to take a breath and to be human and to just get things out the door.
Right on. And then what you said so well in the video too was to show it from where you started to where you are now. And just so beautifully articulated that, look, this is what it was like the first day. Now, if I didn't start until I had this polished production value that I do now, I never would have done one video. But I had to go through, version 1, 1.1, 1.2, up to where I am today in order to get there. So just that willingness to experiment and to allow the creative process to evolve is such a powerful thing, eh?
I think, and I think one of the things that can also stop us up, too, is comparison. We're always comparing where we are right now to someone perhaps that we admire or to someone who's been doing it for 20 or 30 years. And it's like, hello, every pro was once an amateur. Anyone who you admire, whether they're in entertainment, whether they're in personal development, whether they're in business, whether they're in politics, in anything, any field imaginable, every single one of those people had their own first day. Every single one of those people had their own first attempt, their first time standing up and speaking in front of people, their first time doing a video. And everyone that I've had the privilege to know and to talk to always tells me about, oh, my God, you should have saw me back in the day. Whoa, was I a mess? And we've all had that. So there's no harm. It's like starting where we are, taking that first step, being willing for it to not be perfect, but to just get it going. It's the only way you can get to where you want to go. There's this great line from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, and she asked this question, and, someone's wanting to do something, said, do you know how old I'll be when I finally learn to play the piano? And she's like, yeah, the same age you'll be if you don't. And it's very true, as far as starting any kind of project and feeling intimidated, to not compare ourselves and to just get going right where we are.
That's so cool. One of the other interviews I recently did was with Sonia Lyubomirsky, who's one of the leading scientists on happiness, of course, and she was talking about social comparison and how that's just just so detrimental to us to spend all of our time comparing. And she says the happiest people among us, when they do think about other people, they're celebrating their successes. They're not comparing themselves and, finding ways to come up short and all this stuff. And I just love the way you unpack that with everyone had their first day. Are we willing to have that level of humility and confidence to be imperfect and to move from there? Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about too, one of your videos that they're all funny, they're all awesome, and are clear, et cetera, and just real. I loved the fourth grader in me loves this phrase, like you said, the shit sandwiches one. It's exactly it. It's like just saying shit sandwiches is so great. But you framed that so beautifully where someone asked you, I'm having challenges and basically life has given them a shit sandwich. And I thought your response, talking about gratitude and perspective, was just so profoundly on that I wanted to kind of have you riff on that quickly right now, if you could.
Oh, yeah. If you think about problems that are relative, most of the folks listening to this interview right now, most of us, right, are incredibly blessed. Incredibly blessed. Like what we consider problems, other people would literally die for, some of our quote-unquote problems. And any time that I ever find myself having a little pity party, which I think we all do, right, from time to time, it's a wake-up call time. And, just the other day, Brian, I was literally sick. Remember when you were talking about when you had to pull over on the 405 and to throw up? I was nauseous because I was reading about some of the things that have recently happened in India, particularly with one young woman being gang raped. And so I'm reading all these pieces on the New York Times, and it's just like it was killing me, and it motivated me and inspired me to say, how can I do more? How can I do more? And I looked around my life, and all the quote-unquote little piddly things that would frustrate me or that I consider problems or, would want to complain in my own mind about. When you have a broader perspective on the world and you really pay attention to our global society, to what all of humanity is going through, and again, whatever issue kind of lights you up inside, take a look at that. Take a look at I forget the numbers exactly, but how many billions of people live on less than $2 a day? $2 a day. And, when you remember that and you think about what other people's lives are like and compared to yours, and how can you be of service? How can you help, whether it's sending good energy out, sending prayers, paying more attention to your family, bringing more love into the world, doing the work that you're meant to do? There's a million ways to make a difference, and it doesn't always mean writing a check or, going out and becoming an activist or anything like that. But that idea of a sit sandwich, it's like, most people that we know and that we come in contact with, Brian, we don't know shit about shit sandwiches.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah, so profound. And then to be able to alchemize that from, okay, let's take that perspective and then let's figure out back to the starting point. How do we use our greatest gifts and greatest service to the world and get out of that me focus and find a way to let the light shine through us? Well, one of the things, we named our business Entheos after the two words that make up the word enthusiasm. Entheos, God within, right? And for us, it comes down to our fundamentals. What are the things that we do on a day-to-day basis? And Robin Sharma, another one of my favorite writers and friends, says that different people, great people differ in what they express, but they're all consistent on their fundamentals, who they are and what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they show up. They're consistent on those fundamentals. I'd love to hear from you about your fundamentals. What are the things, the practices that you do? I know you're big into a bunch of different things, but I'd love to hear you describe like your key things that just keep you plugged in so you can shine with that God within and give your gifts to the world and live with the radiant enthusiasm you live with. What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So from a practice standpoint, there's one ritual that Josh, my beloved, and I share, which is virtually every morning. It didn't happen this morning because we actually woke up at like 6 a.m. and went to a hot yoga class together, which was its own adventure. But usually we wake up and we have tea together in bed with our dog, and it's just this nurturing time for me to really connect with myself, with him, and to experience love, like real love. It's not get up and rush and try and get things done or blah, 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 which, for all of us that can become pretty routine. And to really make sacred time. And for me, love is one of the most powerful forces in life. I feel like it's my reason for being on earth. So making that the first priority of every day is huge. Meditation is big. Sometimes it comes in the form of, again, sitting in bed, and it can be 10 minutes, or if I happen to be in a yoga class, it can go right at the end of that, which is awesome. green juice, which is a ritual to keep my body eating as many and having as much great nutrients as possible. It just makes me feel good because being busy and sometimes being on the go can be a little challenging when you travel a lot to eat really healthy food. So if I have that base of my nurturing time with Josh, some meditation, some green juice, and then some exercise, those are like my non-negotiables. If those things happen, and they happen most days, I consider everything else a success. Like anything else that happens, I am good to go. But from a more kind of emotional, philosophical perspective, I know that my purpose on this earth is to have a great time and help others do the same. So if I'm having fun and I have my playful sense of humor where I'm not taking myself or anything too seriously, I feel like I am fulfilling God's purpose for me on this planet. There's been times when, like, I've said, oh, I wonder if people don't take me seriously because I'm such a freaking goofball. And I really got clear to the fact that that's one of my gifts, is to be goofy, what you were calling like that fourth grader sense of humor, like shit sandwich. It's I cannot not laugh at things like that. You know, like sophomore humor, it's just me. So making sure that for me personally there's humor and lightness and a sense of play and everything, that's one of my fundamentals that keeps me me.
That is so fantastic. I love it. And we share exercise, nutrition, and I call it attention training through the meditation as core practices. And Alexander and I just started doing a daily number of kisses a day, just as a fun little fundamental of, keep track and let's make sure we're at least touching lips at least 10 times a day. But I love the tea, the love tea is how I'm framing you guys' time, you and Josh in the morning. Yeah. So cool. Right on. Well, just a few more things I'd love to touch on quickly. One, your biggest aha. Have you had like a really big aha moment in your life related to business, related to how you're living that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and this one is unexpected. This one, for me, was so interesting. I actually talked about it when I was on Oprah, but it was one of those things that didn't make it into the episode. We taped a bunch of stuff when I was on Super Soul Sunday, and the show is an hour, but as you know, with commercials, it always gets kind of whittled down. And she asked me this question, like, what's been my greatest lesson? And I actually surprised myself when this came out of my mouth, and later I realized that it was true, that my vulnerability is my greatest strength. And as a woman who's very driven and very ambitious and loves to build and create and, do all this stuff in the world, I didn't expect that to be my aha. But after I said it, and then after I've talked to a couple of people and just kind of looked at it through a couple of different lenses, I was like, wow, that is actually really true. And I didn't think of it before she asked me, and it was almost like it came through me, like that was the truth, and it wasn't premeditated or a soundbite that I had worked up in advance.
Amazing. So tell me, I'm so into Brené Brown these days, and just that idea of being willing to dare greatly and truly be vulnerable. How does that show up for you? Like, how does that come through?
For me, it's it's an open heart. It's a willingness to be soft, to be really feminine, to be mushy, to cry, to be moved, to say I need help, to say I don't have it all together, I don't feel good, I'm feeling insecure right now, or whatever, like kind of anything in that spectrum. And it can come through in lots of different ways, or just to be vulnerable to say, that hurt, or this is how I feel right now, and it may not be the pretty, packaged, polished, cheery version. Anything, again, that pops up in that spectrum, for me, feels vulnerable. And I really feel strong when I'm able to express and be with that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, a whole other week conversation there. Dealing with the constraints of our creative reality here. So I'd love to hear your number one business tip, your number one life tip, then I'd love for you to tell us more about B-School, what's going on, why it's so awesome, why everyone I've heard about who's participated in it has just loved it so much, etc. But your number one biz tip, what would you say?
Number one business tip is that marketing is the greatest world-changing, money-making skill that you could ever learn. And it is all about compassionate, heart-centered communication. like the biggest misunderstanding there is. No matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're selling, what you're creating, what you're sharing with the world, when you commit to mastering marketing, you can connect and change the planet. Not only your own financial well-being and the well-being of your family and anything that you want to invest in terms of philanthropy, but more importantly, whatever your product or your service is, the reason that thing exists is most likely to improve the quality of people's lives on some level. And when you get that, when you really, truly understand marketing, that's when you change the world.
Wow. And marketing is defined as compassionate, heart-centered communication.
Absolutely.
There's a focusing, huh? Beautiful.
Yes. And so in terms of a life tip, for me, I really think there's two things. I know you asked for number one, but they're a little bit melded together.
Yeah.
The biggest life tip for me, the biggest transformative practice was learning to truly be present with what's happening right now and to make that my center of gravity. To know that consciously I can dive into the future or I can look back into the past, but not have that be this habitual existence of ping pong that I don't have any control or awareness of. And to get that now is really all there is, really on a cellular level, and to train myself to live there. That's been the most life-changing. But the second thing I wanted to say was just about love and opening our hearts, continuing to open our hearts and not withhold love. I think just as human beings, it can be so easy to start to wall off your heart and to withhold, little things piss you off or whatever, and to consciously, as often as you can, every moment and every day, remove that withholding and to not give yourself permission to withhold love for any reason. That doesn't mean that you put up with bad things or, you stay in situations that aren't healthy, not that at all. But withholding love, I think, is one of the most poisonous and detrimental habits that any human being can have.
Amen. Wow. Well, thank you for both of those tips, and I appreciate you bending the question to make sure we got both of those in.
Yeah. So B-School, you want to talk about B-School?
B-School, I want to hear about B-School.
I am so incredibly proud of this program. We've graduated thousands of students now around the world. It's an 8-week training program. It's all video-based and beautiful and multimedia, so people can take it from anywhere. But it really teaches aspiring and established entrepreneurs the step-by-step blueprint to taking their idea, whatever they love, again, a product or service, doesn't matter, and teaching them how to market it in a modern way, what I call modern marketing, kind of what we just talked about before. How do you communicate what you have to offer and deliver value to the world in such a way that people are happy to do business with you, that you're creating relationships that not only serve you and from a financial perspective, create a profitable business, but more importantly, that you're creating real and sustainable change in the world using the modern tools of entrepreneurship. So the internet, online marketing, social media when necessary. How do you put all these pieces together and not make yourself crazy? That's what B-School does. It walks people through that, and I'm so proud of the results that people get, and the community that we've formed is like, I could have never predicted this, Brian. People have lifelong friendships. We just sent a film crew around the world to capture the stories of B-Schoolers and how their lives have transformed, and it just moves me to tears to see what happens when people are educated. And one final piece about it is something that's really important to me and to our company is giving back. I never wanted to create a business just to make a bunch of money. I live very simply, and I don't even like shopping. It's like we don't need that much. So extra money, and we give it away to places that we believe in. And I'm so proud of this. We are building our first school in Guatemala this year, which is incredible. So our past class of B-Schoolers, like a portion of their tuition has gone to this school, and we'll be able to fund a school. The initial investment will be not only for the build-out of an entire school, but the funding of the teachers and the supplies for 3 years. We're creating a sustainable plan so that will continue to live on. But one of the things that we love is that when you invest in any of our training programs, you're not just paying me or paying my team or my company. There is a portion going back out to the world. It's part of our Change Your Life, Change the World program.
Right on. Conscious capitalism embodied. So appreciate you and your energy. You are amazing. And
Thank you.
yeah, just appreciate, again, your wisdom, everything you shared today, everything you're doing in the world, and excited to see what's in store in the years and decades ahead. So big hugs.
We hope you enjoyed this Optimal Living interview. Please visit brianjohnson.me for more.